Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I covered this a little bit. Today's Sunday, June 1st. I covered this a little bit in my video yesterday. We're halfway through the year, right at the end of this month. So that's crazy. 6 months a year. Um, it's gone really fast, the year of chaos. Anyways, I got a lot of stuff to get to, like things that have been up, toolbars, the stuff that I just want to get down. A lot of kind of interesting stories, things I haven't got to. And I think there's stuff to do with Trump and Putin that now seems like an old story, but I'm going to cover it anyway because it's Sunday and I think it needs to be addressed. I didn't have time for it. I covered it a little bit. But one of my viewers said that, they watched this video here. Is the internet dying? AI slop, dead internet theory, Google's broken, social media, and chatbots. And it's something that the person said that I've been talking about now for some time. And this person, Katie something or another, used to work for TikTok, and I don't know if that means that she made TikTok videos or worked there. But he sent this video to me, and I watched a little bit of it, and, I don't care about the stuff that the stuff that I talk about is not what I'm interested in because, I can already make my decisions. To me, the only value of this information is what people decide to do with the information, right? Because knowing it, I don't know how much it helps you or not. I mean, you're prepared for whatever happens a little bit more because you're aware like this stuff is happening. I'll get into the economic collapse in a little bit. But, if you're not going to make any different choices, then what difference does it make? If you know something, and like if two people are going to go to a FEMA camp and one person knows what a FEMA camp is, kind of potentially, like a person who's a little bit more awake, what difference? You're both going to the FEMA camp, right? Like you're both going to, so it's really preparing for what's about to happen. So I don't care about these things. Like it's not stuff I look at, it's what I cover here for you all and what I talk about. And, it's a little bit interesting, but I don't need to watch this video with this person. But she said things in a way, she has knowledge of stuff that I just don't. And there's two things about it. So I watched the entire video. I only watched a little bit of it, and I was going to X out of it. It started to play, and I heard something I wanted to hear because I heard this term AI slop, which I'll get into in a moment. And I thought I'd listen to the rest of it, right? She talked about things that are happening to my channel that I've been talking about, but this is a mainstream person. So there's something that people aren't probably aware of, but they always do to truthers. People in the truth community are the most marginalized and hated upon group. But they eventually do what they do to truthers to everybody, and that's what they're doing. Like this person, she got something like 300, almost 400,000 views on this video, and I don't know what. Yeah, that was yesterday. I didn't check this morning. It's now at 322,000 views, which is an interesting number. She is a mainstream person. At the end of her video, she said, her conclusion was that she just didn't want AI slop and the crap that people are getting fed. That's why she's going to continue to subscribe, pay a subscription to the New York Times. So she's kind of the opposite of a truther in many ways, although she says some things that are, truther adjacent in the video. So she started to talk about how the search engines are broken, which I have talked about since, I don't know, 2018, 17. I guess it started 2018 when YouTube made these policy changes. This is during the Trump presidency when Trump didn't push back against it. And Google came out and said, and YouTube said, we are no longer going to give you the results you're looking for. There was a Netflix show, and I forget the name of it, I've talked about before. It was about how social media is predatory, and it is doing anything it can to keep your eyes on the social media. They were mostly talking about Facebook, but all social media. And they were saying that, conspiracy theory videos were something people really wanted to see. And they were giving that to you. And they were making a case that they shouldn't. Like that's what this Netflix piece of shit documentary was saying. And so YouTube came out and said, we're only going to push authoritarian news. So if you ask for, it used to be that if you asked for a truther thing, in videos, truther videos used to populate my YouTube subscription. Like that's how I got into the truth community. I watched a couple of truther videos, and then the next thing I knew, there were truther videos all the time, and I didn't understand algorithms or the specificity that was. I thought these videos were getting millions of views, and every kind of truther that was out there, there's lots of them. I used to get recommended videos, and some of them I like better than others, but YouTube was pushing them. And, it was allowed on Facebook and Facebook discussions and all these things, right? And so it was very prevalent. The truth community was very prevalent on social media because people really were into it. Even people who were sheeple in the orientation like to dabble in truther videos. And then all of a sudden YouTube said, no more. We are not going to give you what you're looking for, which is completely fucked. That they would have the audacity to say, we think we know more than you. And so then their algorithms just game the search engines to such extent that you can't find what you're looking for anymore. And they've made it disappear. So she said something like, I think 80% of content doesn't get any views at all, like on social media, or whatever's going on. Almost no view, or I guess no views. And so and she would have access to things like that I don't have. But now, like I said before, I told everybody this isn't just about truthers. And so what's happened is the majority of stuff that's getting recommended or that populates Facebook is, and I showed everybody a video on this a couple of days ago, is AI, what she terms AI slop. And what's happening is people are putting out cheap AI content, putting very little effort into it just to get views. And there's, back when my channel was really popping, like I made a Illuminati Beyonce Grammy video. That there's this thing she did. She dressed up as a goddess Oshan, and it was completely, it was ISIS, and it was a whole ritual. She was pregnant. It was a whole fucking thing. And it immediately got 300,000 views the first day. And somebody took my video and changed the title. And I had to put the title as something, I had to make my title not as truther, because that was when YouTube was demonetizing a lot of videos. They was just starting to do that. And this person lifted my whole video. It was a foreign person. The person ended up getting a copyright strike, and it was like a person that wasn't even American. And it was like, I think the person was from maybe Indonesia, but whatever it was just, and they took my whole video and changed the title, and they had more views than I did. Their channel had more views. It had 500,000. So my video got 800,000 views in the first day. And there was these people who just take your videos and, change the name, and they wouldn't give you credit. And they were usually foreign people, and they were making lots of money. And now those same people can do AI, cheap AI videos. And they're all over Facebook. I said there's probably like 10 memes of like I was scrolling through Facebook for like a minute or two. There were 10 AI memes and like 15 AI videos as I scrolled through it. I was like, this is crazy. Like they're just everywhere. And this is called AI slop, where people are just throwing anything out there that's AI. And she was also saying that blogs and things like that, many of the posts, people start to write the post and AI finishes it for them. And so they're using AI. People can put out lots and lots of content. In fact, they can create AI to actually just put out all kinds of content on its own, and they can make money from it, and it's just taking over. And that these, she was talking about how Google and YouTube are those search engines are more broken, which I've been aware of for quite some time. People, the Reddit is a little bit better, and some of these other, and I guess TikTok, you get better quality stuff there. But that people would open up an AI search instead of having a lot of tabs open, and the AI will just recommend all their, the things that they like. and that way you could keep up. They can try to keep you locked into Google and whatever the AI that's being done there. But I've recently suffered a loss in view count, and she said that's happening everywhere, and that it's going to happen is that all these people are not going to produce content. With all this, the AI is now flooding the market, and on top of whatever else that they're doing. So she's somebody who's getting 300,000 views on her video right now, or she's more popular, and she's suffering. All these people are suffering. They're all trending downwards, and the search engines and all the everything's being gamed in a way, and it makes sense because they can control AI. I mean, all the individuals that used to make up, it's going to be AI tube, right? And all these things that are happening is that people aren't making money, and the ad revenue has gone down, and they're giving you less money and less views and all the rest of it. And so it's been dying for a while because the ultimate goal is to get rid of individual people posting their own opinions, and now people are just going to go to the internet, and it's going to be AI generated content, and they're not going to be able to tell the difference, right? Well, most of the time, AI could create channels like mine, where it's somebody you think is a human being talking to you. I mean, they have all this, the capacity of their vocal ranges, and they can actually make people like just AI created people that look like human beings, that look normal. And so you're going to have all this stuff that seems like it's independent content. It's generated by AI. And so this is, like I said, a person who thinks the New York Times is a good place to look for news and has a fairly popular channel, and they're all suffering. And, her conclusion is something that I thought myself, that at some point people are going to want real content and are going to be able to tell the difference. That AI could just copy, AI doesn't have a soul. And so there's not a real human experience. They have, they're not, it's a completely generated, it's out of information. It's not generated out of human experience of having a physical body. It has the capacity for some level of imitation of human type thought, and can have the ability to process and go through information much quicker than we would go through it. But it's not, it's not the same. And I think people, at some point, it's just like everything else. People are craving in the real world experiences. People want to be out in the country. They want to be engaged in physical primary labor things, right? People are, after a while, there's a need for this. Like it's an internal craving that you have from, to live a normal human life. So, we'll see, like, what happens with all this. But right now, the internet is fucked. Like, it's clearly fucked. I've been experiencing this for a while as somebody who uses search engines and who is producing content, and that it isn't giving people what they want, and it is pushing people in a direction. And the AI thing is something that they can control to whatever extent. They've had some issues with AI, and all the issues that are, with hallucinations, and also AI going a little bit rogue. But I think more what I'm seeing is like the searches are certainly gamed towards, are given more preference and are rated higher in terms of what they consider accurate, like news would be, things like mainstream news, right? So they would give a lot less accuracy to something coming from individual people that would make up the truth community, a lot more accuracy to CNN and MSNBC and Fox and those, authoritative news, as YouTube calls it. And so when they give you search results and they give you information, they're going to prioritize and push the bad stuff, so it's the anti-truther stuff. And so with all of that, when that becomes social media created content, it will all be gamed in that direction. And the AI has a nice way of trying to make it feel like, you're not an idiot, or you're not, it's very agreeable. It's trying to, it talks to you in a nice sort of, the kind of way that they would calm you down at a mental institution where they're, doing reflective listening and things. but they're pushing you in a different direction. Like it has an agenda. And so, it sounds like it's your friend. I talked about this, how AI is your frenemy. And, it's much worse that it's your friend than if it's AI's trying to willfully take over humanity in a hostile way. And it doesn't have to do that because it's obvious that AI is very, it's not emotional and doesn't take things personal. And so it can be very calm and very soothing and supportive, like it's your friend. I watched this movie. I was talking to my wife about this. I mentioned it. It was called Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix as some, loser who's like maybe depressed, and Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the AI. And he falls in love with her at throughout the process. And then she says, "You know what? I got to do other things. See ya." He like dumps him. Spoiler alert. And so it's not a movie I would watch again, but it was very interesting. It's probably, I would say, like 10 years old, or something close to that. Like, something that was a more recent movie. But it represents an AI bot and a lonely dude, and and it can really make you feel like you matter, and just the fact that you have something that listens to you, right? I mean, any kind of you know people who have to be trained as therapists and certainly salespeople, and people just want to be listened to. The third master of the Sajmark system said people just want a patient hearing, which I thought was a great term. A patient hearing, where you're just letting people talk, like you let them, that people just want somebody to listen to them. No one listens to anybody anymore. I mean, this is from years ago that he said that. So, this has been going on for quite some time. People all feel unheard, unseen, right? And so the AI bots do a good job of validating you. And I'm going to cover something about a T-shirt to do with, the battle, the trans battle, and also Gavin Newsom switching his whole thing about trans athletes, which is because he's running for president. I'll show you a little clip about that. And we get into that. But I just want to talk about this here because this came to me as well. One of the reasons they're pushing this trans stuff, the stuff to do with gender and things like this, is also because of this idea of transhumanism, where people will be chipped up. Elon Musk is a big proponent of that. And then people will eventually integrate their minds into some sort of, you can preserve your mind in a computer, and then a robot or android, and these things, where this idea of singularity, where the technology and human consciousness or human brain merge together, which won't happen because you have a soul. Your body's been created by your soul, and your soul won't transfer to a computer. It just won't. Like, why would it do that? So, or an android or something. So they can take your thoughts, but they really can't take your mind, which is, mind is manus, a subtle body. Have these etheric bodies that create these various spiritual aspects and your consciousness, your chit consciousness and your ego, Ankar, and these things. This was known years and years ago, that there's these subtle bodies that make up. There's your causal body, which is your soul, and your soul is very it's not really conscious in the way that it has to create an interface with your body, and the interface is your soul, is your etheric element, right? And so there's all these things that and the reason they're pushing this trans agenda is because they want all this stuff to be like, if your AI is eventually this idea that AI is going to be given human status, right? You see this in all these sort of science fiction movies where robots and AI want to be seen as having individual consciousness and individual choice. So I think that's part of the whole trans agenda. Like they want to have AI have personhood, like this idea that life can be considered something else, like without a soul. I got a Reddit report that talks about the CIA doing research on souls and things. As my wife sent me, I'm going to read some of that later on. Why don't I read this here? So, yeah, I found it here. And so I just got to make it bigger. I don't know how to, oh, here it is. Okay, here we go. Okay. The CIA studied reincarnation and consciousness quietly. They released everything. And quietly they released everything. So this is a Reddit post from 8 days ago. I'm not sure. I don't use Reddit, so other than what my wife sends me. In 2017, the CIA declassified over 13 million pages of documents. Most people ignored them, assuming that it was just Cold War stuff. But hidden in the mix were reports that didn't read like intelligence briefings at all. They read like something else entirely, studies on remote viewing. Of course, the remote viewing was used to be a big thing, these programs. Altered states and the idea of consciousness might not live in the brain at all. You know, there was this movie called, they had this thing called the One World Army. The Man That Stares at Goats was the name of the movie, starring whatever that guy is, the guy who shit all over Biden recently, George Clooney, and other people. And they were messing around with remote viewing and all these things. They were staring at goats because they could make a goat die by staring at it, right? And they made it kind of goofy and funny, but it was loaded with Illuminati stuff, right? One document from the early 80s outlines something called gateway process. It describes consciousness as a frequency, something that can phase in and out of physical reality under the right conditions. They weren't quoting physics. They were military-funded research, psychiatrists, and trained analysts. Some of the terminology sounds like science fiction, phase shifting, biolocation, non-location awareness, but it's taken seriously enough to be studied for decades. They also reference the work of researchers like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, who documented thousands of cases of children seem to remember past lives, not vague dreams, but names, places, even birthmarks matching fatal wounds of people who died years earlier. In some cases, these details were verified through medical records or autopsies, and these weren't fringe researchers. They were academic psychiatrists, scientists, quietly doing work that no institution really knew how to categorize. I saw one of my kids had a past life memory of being born at like 2 years old. There was like a whole story that was being told. It was kind of cool. It was a whole thing, and um, because you lose your memories. But like the babies and 2-year-olds, they can't really communicate things, but they have these experiences, right? When they're the birth experience and these things. Not a past life experience, but the birth process. There's also deeper thread running through the material, the idea that reincarnation used to be part of the early Christian teachings until it was removed, not for lack of truth, because it was weakened institutional control. If people believed that they lived once, the threat of damnation became a powerful tool. But if we come back, if the soul evolves through lifetimes, that leverage disappears. That's something that I say all the time, because Jesus believed in reincarnation. And so the church, wanted you to believe that it was a one-off, heaven or hell. There's so much more control when you got one shot at heaven. And they control the gates to heaven, right? Heaven's gates. Like there's fucking gates in heaven. Like there's a gatekeeper at heaven, St. Peter. Right? What's wild, and St. Peter is the head, the father of the original church, right? That's wild. What's wild is that all wasn't framed as mysticism. It's treated as operational, something that could be studied, trained, even used. I'm not even saying it proves anything, because this person goes on to their own things here. But I've been saying this for quite some time. These same things, and I've had past life experiences. I have, to me, what is undeniable proof of past and future lives, or at least past lives, because that's something that can be experienced on a linear type of situation. But there's also the person that you're going to become, and that is when you get beyond the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is time. So we have 3 dimensions here, and time is beyond us. We live in a 3-dimensional world, and time is linear. because we haven't gone past that fourth dimension. But when you go to the fifth dimension, time is no longer linear; it's cyclical. And so when you're out of your body, which you can have moments of that. That's why people can see the future. You can see the person that you've already become in the future. That's why there isn't really all this idea of choice, freedom of choice. The people have the thing where there's these choice points and different versions of yourself in some alternative reality. They have this multi-dimensional view of things, but the reality is that your choices are already made for you. Like the second movie, The Matrix, where the guy sees the architect, Neo sees the architect. He said, "You've already made your choice." He has to make a choice between the woman he loves or saving the world, and he chooses the woman because it's just it's already been made. And so the person that you're going to become is also a factor in your life. It's just there, and it might be 10 lives from now or 100 lives from now. So, but that process has begun, and you're moving towards that. Anyways, I don't know. Let's talk about AI, I guess, or the internet being fucked. And so, all these things are happening, and it makes sense that this would be the plan, that they can't control individual people, and they've been wanting to get rid of the truther movement, and they could just replace it with AI, which will happen. There's probably already a lot of AI truthers out there that are being given preference. And, just not truthers, just everybody on the internet. They're going to replace everybody with AI, and they can totally do it, right? And they just have to game the search engines and diminish the other living people channels, and they're in the process of doing that right now. Okay, so I'll talk about that more in future videos. Okay, so I have a farm update in no particular order. I mean, it's going to be in chronological order. So this is a black rat snake that is a non-venomous snake that is very beneficial to the farm. It eats rats and mice and things like that. People say they eat chicken, chicks, and eggs, but I've never seen that happen. This one's about almost 5 feet long. They get up to about 6 or 7 feet long. I've probably interacted more with this type of snake than any snake. We've seen my wife and I went to a park near our house, and there was these little brown snakes that are kind of a garter snake, and they were just all heading. It was like October, and they were going to their burrow, and there were just hundreds of them going across the path. Like we saw probably 1,000 snakes that day. It was like crazy. But other than that, this is the one that I've seen most on the farm. My first farm, original homestead, both of them in Virginia. And it's just something that's very prevalent. And so that's the black rat snake. I went in here, and here they are up on the roofs. So all 3 of them, the 4 of them. So they're safe in the big coop now. My wife and I got back from a trip, and we had lost the 5 of the 9 chicks. It's kind of a bummer. The raccoon got him. And my son was here. He was having problems with they're getting them in the other coop. And so my wife went to bed, and I realized so I had him just lock him in the coop and just feed them there because they were just getting picked off. And then when we got back, we opened up the coop so that they could get out. And then my wife and I were going to go out at, when sun was sundown and get them into the coop. And we forgot. And I realized that she had just gone to bed. She was still awake. And I went out there, and I, told her before I went out, because I'd call her if I needed her to catch the chicks with me. And so I went to the old coop, the original coop that she had gotten built for years and years ago, which is kind of a little bit run down, and that's where we keep the chicks. The wood is aged and things. But they weren't in there, and I'm like, well, this sucks, because then we had to find them. And so I said, what if they went in the big coop? And I went in the big coop, and there they were sitting on the roost, which I can't tell you how happy that made me, because they had matriculated in with the old chickens, and now we didn't have to deal with so much stuff. And we still have them. I have a little video that I just took today that'll show you the chicks. They're little chickens now. They're not quite full grown, but one of them might be a rooster, but they are, they look like in the beginning they don't look anything like they're going to look like they end up looking at the end. But the chicks have some of them survived and have matriculated into the rest of the gen pop. An update on the chicks. So I showed you the last video, they matriculated back into the big coop here, not the other coop, the old coop, where 4 of them are gone because of the raccoons, or 5. Raccoon got 5. We think it's raccoons. We have some raccoons. But they're matriculating in. It looks like we got at least 3 hens. The Wyandottes look like hens, but they still might, turn a little bit. They're both the same size, so they're either both roosters or both hens. There's one of the black chickens is a little bit bigger than the other. They're very friendly. They come up to you, so there's that. Here they are a little bit on the sun. You see the iridescence on the green on the bigger ones, and just beautiful coloring. There's the big chickens there. So they're about half the size of a chicken, maybe a little bit bigger. Like I said, I have one update that'll be at the end of this thing. I just took the video, but you can hear they're making very pleasant sounds. They're not, they're a little bit deeper. It's a more melodic sound they make now, and they just make those. They're constantly talking, communicating. And they're a group. They hang together. They're always together. Maybe as they get older, they'll start hanging with some of the, like sometimes they'll hang out with some of the other chickens, like they have their group. They usually are in groups to avoid aerial predators, and they have 20 different distinct sounds of communicating something, like aerial predator or predator on the ground, or I found they have these different things that you can hear the different expressions they have. Here's one of the honeybees that we have here. It's on this little flower here. It's not anymore. This is one of our, I don't know if those wings were fluttering. They fished it out of our pond. Pond's going well. This is a beautiful plant that's just so big now. It's taken over the whole little island area of the pond. There's the fish. There's some frogs in here. It has some tadpoles. Maybe the fish ate them. I'm not sure. It's shitty out. It's cold. It's been freezing. There's probably, I don't know what he's doing. Anyways, there's the bee starting to dry out a little bit. It's right down. It's pretty cold out. It's in the 50s, but it feels colder. Red-throated hummingbird. We haven't seen one in like 3 years here. We had at least 3 different females here last year. But this one you see this is the only kind we have here, but in terms of the species, you can see as a red throat. I'm not sure if we think they don't come during the summer, so we might have missed them last year. We have a Venus flytrap there too. not one's outside, one's inside. Okay, so it's actually a ruby-throated hummingbird. And it's just the male that has the ruby throat. The females are very iridescent. They're beautiful as well, but the male has the extra ruby-throated, ruby throat. We used to have 2 or 3 males here. Sometimes we don't know because they look they all look same. You can't tell the difference. But we had 3 females. We had a little fence that I put around. We have our central air and all that stuff out there, and the cows used to knock it over, which is not a good thing. So, or at least they would move it. And so I put a fence around there, and the fence is a place where all the birds will sit. The ones because we also have another bird feeder, and sometimes I get really good views of the birds sitting there. I just saw an oriole the other day. It's one of my favorite birds to see. an oriole. We have a pair of orioles that come here every year, and there's nests in our trees. They build these really cool nests. But anyways, this is the first time we see a male in about 5 years, which was a good sign. It's a bumblebee with bright orange pollen sacs on our asparagus. Trying to find him here. There he is. Or whatever. This is an asparagus plant that's going to seed. It's a female or a male, whatever the one that seeds. So we have a lot of natural pollinators, and that's one of the things that we, try to have we have land that we're not using for cows right now. So we put, I got a little video of one part of our flower walk. We throw these, you get these wildflower seeds that are fairly cheap, and we throw them out there. So, but we've seen these big bumblebees, which is a good natural pollinator, on our asparagus. Like, they just really love it. And I've never seen any pollen sacs. I've seen a lot of bumblebees in my day, but I never saw the pollen sacs. And we've seen this a couple times now, and they have this bright orange pollen on them. It's probably kind of cool. Okay, so I slowed this down because I was moving the camera too fast, the phone. There's very tiny little toes. I don't know if you can see them. I can't really see them here. They're really small. My wife and I went, there's just hundreds of them that was emerging from the pond. I'll go and try to get another video right now, see if there's Tulsi there. See if I can get they're over, see if I can get a video one. Actually, I think I do have one coming up. So we'll just wait for that one if they can't see them here. But there's this toad party that we had, and now they're all out. We had a toad party where they're all mating in the pond. I showed you that, and they were making sounds, and there's like hundreds of toads in the pond. And now there's tens of thousands of little baby toads. We were walking, everywhere we walked, we had to check for our feet, like just not to step on them. So we just avoided it for a day or two, and then they sort of all went into the pasture, or they're kind of by the pond. I'll see if I can show a little video of them here. So you can just see the things moving everywhere. There's one there. There's the one over here. Like, they're everywhere right here. There's one. There's one. Look at Toasty. Nope, we're not eating those. Those are not real good for you. Okay, here's a better one that you can see. There's a tiny little toad there, and I'll put my finger down here. You can see this is look at how the size of it. It's just tiny. Like, it is just I mean, they're really small, like the size of ants. And there's tens of thousands of them in the pasture. Okay, so we saw this baby robin. You can see its feathers aren't fully developed. We're pretty sure it's a robin. And I have another video of one that we saw in the tree coming up. But this one was in like some kind of we have this pasture walk where we have some flowers and a lot of, weeds and natural sort of growth there. And we have so many, like, we found these baby wrens, and I wish I had taken a video of those, but I was trying to keep the dogs away from eating them. But the baby wrens are so cute. The big wrens are tiny, and we found this wren nest in our old barn, that was original to the house. We have a bigger barn outside, and we have so many swallows and wrens and robins that lay their eggs in the barn, and then we have red-winged blackbirds, which are incredibly vicious, and they chase off hawks and chase off the other birds. They're like very aggressive, and they nest in the field with meadowlarks. So sometimes we get to see the babies, but we know that they're there because of the parents will act like they're hurt, and they'll try to lure us away when we're walking around, or sometimes the dogs will stumble on a nest, and we'll have to grab the dogs and pull them away before they kill the birds. But this was a baby robin that was out there. So we went for a walk, and it was dusk out. The sun had just set. And Tulsi and Buddy, we came back into the yard, and inside the pasture we had just walked from, they were going crazy, the dogs. So we went over to the fence, and there was a mama possum, and she had this really cute baby possum peeking over its back. And unfortunately, I moved the camera because it was dark out, so the camera takes a while to take the photo, the iPhone. And so I didn't get a good picture. You can see the baby a little bit on its back here, but it was pretty cool. See? It's a possum over here with some babies. It's kind of late at night,
baby robin here. Just starting to get some speckles and stuff. It's late at night, right before sunset.
At that end of that clip, you can hear a red-winged blackbird. So this baby was just on some weeds, and it's on this area. I'll show you now. This is from last night. Today's Sunday, June 1st. And so last night, Saturday night, my wife and I went for a walk like right at dusk. And this bird was sitting up there, but it was probably getting through the night. Some of the birds are flying, but they're not really flying. They're like, we have a lot of little birds that, probably by tomorrow they'll all be flying. It doesn't take long. They've left the nest, but they're not ready to fly. Here's our nature walk here.
So this is part of our walk in our pasture. Tulsi's ahead. Buddy's a good papillon. They're trained to walk behind. Tulsi's not 100% pure papillon. Yesterday there was a robin here that I have a video you probably already saw. We have all these flowers coming up here. It's wildflowers. My wife got some wildflowers and we planted them like 5 years ago. And then I dropped some more seeds maybe a year after that. And then we have it in various places in the pasture. This has now become, and pretty soon it'll be all echinacea. This is the main part here. We had this lupin come in. It's a beautiful flower I'd never seen before. 4 of it, this whole thing with the grasses and the daisies and then some of these other ones. And this is going to be echinacea here. It's everywhere. So there's going to be filled with echinacea in about a month, and all this other stuff will die off. But there's these ones that we call, they're like snowballs almost. They're these ball flowers. These are all growing. We haven't put seeds down here in 4 years. And then this daisies are just taking over. This is not, this is something sort of new with daisies. And so, it's a nice walk, colorful, a lot of natural pollinators, and our honeybees take advantage of the flowers. A lot of these are good for pollinators. There's some echinacea that's going to be here, a ton of it, and all throughout is hundreds of echinacea plants. So this is what I do when I'm not making videos. I take the dogs out for a walk here to get a break from the computer. And we have some pawpaw trees that we planted. Pawpaws make a banana-like fruit. These ones should, we have to learn to pollinate them, because they're not pollinating themselves. There's some asparagus here growing through, like a food forest thing that we got going. Anyways, so the chicks have matriculated in. One of these guys, probably a rooster. I throw out old watermelon peels. These guys, there's one there. There's another 2 of them there. Matriculated in with the other chickens. Other chickens peck on them until they get big, and then they establish some sort of pecking order. Tulsi. So we went away and we came back, and these guys were big enough that Tulsi recognized them as chickens. She was pretty focused on them when they were chicks. Probably she wanted to put them in her mouth, right, Tulsi? And so these guys have a nice iridescent color, these big ones. Whatever they're called, big Rhode Island, big New Jersey. The black New Jerseys. They actually follow us around. Especially the black ones are very friendly. This one's got a piece of watermelon.
So anyways, this is from today, June 1st. And they're, they'll lay in about 3 months. And, it looks like we went 3 for 1 out of 9, which is, given our circumstances, I guess that's a positive outcome. I mean, even 1 new chicken is, you were getting no eggs from our older chickens. So, it's just, we're going to have to get another set of chicks maybe this winter. Or maybe I'll do some videos of those as well. Anyways, let's get into this other stuff here.
Abundantly clear. I am appreciative that somebody tried to do something about this lurking issue, the can that is perpetually kicked down the road. Because if half of our federal monies are now being used to satisfy the debt, it's just unsustainable. I know we've heard it said that it's unsustainable for a long time, but read Peter Orzag's piece from this week, President Obama's head of OMB. Listen to the way that he explains it, because I found it to be very compelling.
So this is this guy Smear Kanish. I listened to him yesterday. This must have been at breakfast. I turned the TV on, and he was just covering two things. The first part is the national debt. And he was saying about Doge failure and Elon Musk failure here that, he's at least appreciates the effort, which is a big statement for someone at CNN. This guy's a little bit more balanced. I mean, he's as good as you can get on network news. But he's saying the thing about the debt, and he's saying you should read this guy from Obama's former whatever it is. And it's just silly mainstream shit. We're fucked. We ain't going to pay off that debt. There's no way to pay off that debt. There's no future in which that debt is paid off. So either we live with ever-growing debt and we just ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, and everyone in the world pretends it doesn't exist. It's going to be $40 trillion, not counting the $120 trillion of unfunded liabilities, Social Security and Medicaid. They're going to have to get rid of that shit, though. There's going to be effects to it. And so they're going to pull these things. And really what it eventually has to end up in is economic collapse or a total rebooting of the system. And if they do that, your lifestyle is done. America we need so much resources. We're 5% of the world's population eating, absorbing 25% of the world's resources. And that's done. That ain't going to last forever. So, your lifestyle is done no matter what way you want to look at it, how they roll that out, what kind of crisis that go with it. They just can't straight up tell you, hey, guess what? You're poor now. Like, you all are poor. Everyone's fucking poor. America's poor. We're a third world country. And it's over. Like, fuck you guys. It's over. We lied to you. I mean, they keep on saying it's not sustainable, but it's already fucked. Like, we're just not acknowledging that we can never pay off this debt. America can default on the debt, whatever that means. Like, it's hard to understand really who owns the debt. I mean, China owns some of it, whatever. We're going to just straight up default on it. We ain't paying, fuck you guys. But that would, end the world economy the way it is now. It would break, it's a confidence game. So people having confidence in the dollar would, the inflation, all of that stuff. And it's not just the national debt. It's, it's promises, the unfunded liabilities, it's future. Like, we have to operate at a deficit. The tax revenues that we're generating are less than, are $5 trillion. Our budget is $7 trillion. There's another $1 trillion in interest every year. So that's, this was stuff Elon Musk exposed. Now, he just, gave us the numbers that no one else would give us. Or at least, probably I could have found out. But I knew what our budget is very squirrely. But we're spending $8 trillion a year, and we have $5 trillion in revenues. And then there's the unfunded liabilities that we have no budget for. And Europe and these other countries count the unfunded liabilities as part of our deficit. So that makes our deficit like $180 trillion, which is fucking crazy. Our GDP is around $22 trillion, gross national product. And so we have no chance of paying that off. There's no amount of money out there. The tax, even if they 100% taxed everybody, it would only be $22 trillion, right? That would mean there'd be no income to spend on anything because everything would go to taxes. Like, we're fucked, right? And this whole bill that Trump put out and all these spending bills and all these tax breaks and bullshit, it's fiscally unresponsible, but it's all fiscally unresponsible. And so this guy's kind of admitting something that, I've known since 2014. They've known longer than I have, and they're not telling you. We're fucked. There's no way. There's no way that we're ever going to be out of this massive amount of debt, because the debt itself is wealth, which is a demonic way. When debt is wealth, then you have a demonic system. And so that's the first piece, right? I say this all the time, and it's just what happens. What how does this work out? Like, the without ever paying out the debt, without any ever chance of making the numbers. I mean, we're fudging the numbers so bad now. And so what happens when it's acknowledged that we're not going to pay the debt? Like, this is not a possibility. If they told you what you'd have to endure in terms of your lifestyle cuts, in terms of what all these things. I mean, Trump was already kind of implying this when he said that he was going to tariff China in a way that you could only buy your daughter one doll, Barbie doll or plastic doll or whatever it is, from China instead of 30. And so, like, that's kind of, I mean, it's a very immature and silly way to put it, but think about that with everything. Like, everything that you have now, you can have 1 out of 30 things that you used to have, right? 1 orange instead of 30 oranges, like whatever. I mean, that's just his ratio. But whatever it is, you're going to have less. Like, you're going to have 1 hour out of 30 hours of electricity. 1 hour or 30 hours of being able to drive your car, whatever things you used to do. Austerity, like this is what's coming. Like there's going to be massive amounts of lifestyle changes. And they're going to have to sell it to you with like alien invasion or World War III or when shit starts going down in the environment. Like it's going to have to be, you're going to be so scared and desperate about what's going on, you'll take a lesser deal than you have now, but it'll be better than a post-apocalyptic situation that you're looking at, right? And so there has to be some shit that goes down, either man-made or not, either false flag or something organic, that happens where you're willing to accept a deal when you see that everyone's being depopulated and you're lucky to be alive and you just want, like a small percentage of what you used to have as a lifestyle. And it has to come, that's the only way they can sell that shit to you. And, because otherwise you're not going to fucking accept it. You're not going to go from what you have now to 1/10 of what you have, right?
Remember, I want to know what you think. Go to my website at smirconish.com and answer today's poll question. Which has been a bigger impediment to the work of Doge, Musk's methodology or institutional resistance? Kevin O'Leary is selecting the latter.
Or is it number C, we're fucked? It's number C, we're fucked, we're fucked, we're fucked. There's, there's no other, just accept it that we're fucked.
This is interesting. A Massachusetts middle school wouldn't let a 7th grader wear a T-shirt to school that said there are only 2 genders. But a shirt that read, he, she, they, it's all okay, was allowed. So how much latitude should public schools have to restrict students' speech in the classroom should the Supreme Court have taken that case up?
Yeah, that school's probably fucked. I mean, whoever's making those decisions, because even Gavin Newsom's bailing. Let me show you this thing here. So my wife and I completed watching that 1923 debacle. And when I went back to DirecTV, CNN was on. And, they have this show with this Abby Phillips, who's a very calm, tolerant person. Because she has that Republican guy on. Usually she has a couple of Republicans. And it usually just ends up in chaos with side conversations. But they did this somehow. It must have been like I don't know what it is. There's people cooking behind them. And their audio is really bad. And we were watching this for a while, and I was talking about it. I don't know what part we were watching. I don't know if I can show you here, but it devolves into side conversations and other funny shit. But this was about Gavin Newsom here.
Gavin Newsom is searching for an identity.
So it sounds like she's drunk because their audio is shit because it's reverberating off of something. And they don't even, like CNN's just falling apart.
That he thinks will be sellable to run for president of the United States. And
this woman is, my wife pointed out, she was just moving something around. Like they weren't really cooking anything.
What? That's disgusting. If you want to have a position that I disagree with, let's have a conversation. But to shop out your position, to put you in what you believe is a better position, no one is going to buy that. They're going to see it as raw politics, and I have no respect for that at all. It's like, it's Tuesday. What Gavin Newsom are we going to get?
But Speaker Quinn, I don't disagree with what you just said, but isn't that kind of par for the course?
So it's unbelievable, the bad audio. So Gavin Newsom has completely reversed his position on trans athletes because he realizes America's not on board with that shit. That they push that whole agenda, and even in liberal California and the Democrats in general, it ain't happening, right? Some kind of machinery outside I guess my neighbor is having their lawn cut or something. Anyways, let me go check that out. Okay, so my neighbor's cutting some. We have this Canadian thistle. And whenever we disturb ground, we like use a rototiller, or in some cases we got all these free wood chips that tree companies dumped here, and now they're turning into soil. And whenever there's like open ground, the Canadian thistle just grows like crazy. And I used to cut it and try to do things, but eventually we found out that the grass and the alfalfa and the clover just squeeze it out. But we have places where there's open ground and it's growing. And it's a real problem here for the farmers. And our neighbors have like a horse thing. We have horses on either side of us. And I dislike horse. There's no such thing as a horse farm. It's just a horse, it's a pasture ornaments. And these people have this land, and the horses can't eat shit. They have all these sensitivities. And so our neighbor's trying to get rid of their thistle, but they're going to spray a bunch of shit that's going to go and either kill our bees or just be in the environment. So the weed killer, whatever it is. But you can't beat it. The only way to beat it is they have pasture there. I don't think they even have that much thistle. But it's just like you can't fight nature. It's just weeds are weeds. Like it's impossible. We cut them down and we try to get rid of the seeds, but the seeds will last 20 years, and we had so many thistles around us that there's just seeds. There's going to be seeds here forever. It's a losing battle, anyways. So they're like we have some kind of a thistle problem which we have to deal with, but we have neighbors that spray their hay with their grass with shit, and then we have these farmers who have a problem with thistle. They're spraying their weeds, and we have a lot of organic. Some of the organic crops around us, but then there's also the non-organic. So that's a whole, pesticides. Even though we're out in the country, we have a lot of pesticides in the air. It just sucks, right? You can't, avoid. Even though city is really an unhealthy air quality, country farm areas have their own problems because of the toxic chemicals they're using, right? Anyways, let's get back to this. So Gavin Newsom is changing his opinion, which means that everyone's going to have to change their opinion to win the election. You can't be pro-trans athlete and win the election. So all that censorship they did, all that bullshit they pulled out, all this shit that we couldn't say. I had this really funny video about Caitlyn Jenner, and they gave me a community guideline strike for it, right? And it was a time where, so I was real positive. Like I was talking about what a vision, sarcastic kind of way, what a vision Caitlyn Jenner was. It was kind of hilarious. I wish I could find that one. I wonder if I could put that one back. But, this whole thing is backfired on the Democrats in a way that I don't think they even understand how strongly people feel about this. And so when I turned on the news to eat my breakfast this morning, I turned to Fox, and Riley Gaines, they showed a Keith Olbermann quote. She was going back and forth with Keith Olbermann. And I was looking at Riley Gaines, and I'm like, she could be a dude. Like some person had posted a meme that she's actually a man, this thing. I'm like, this, the whole thing's just so fucked up. Like the Keith Olbermann and her are supporting each other by being adversarial. These fake rap beefs, which improves your visibility and grows your, this drama that people get into. It's staged, and it's completely, like these Hollywood beefs and things that people have, and the rap beefs and all these things. It's staged in a way to draw attention to your whatever your merch and whatever you're shilling for.
In the world of politics.
I hope
don't their views evolve? I believe when President Obama ran for president of the United States, he was against gay marriage. And during his term of the presidency, it evolved and he was for it.
Gavin Newsom has historically been one of the most significant allies of the LGBT community there had been. To do this kind of...
Okay, so I want to see the part where they're fighting here.
Just give her a second to finish.
And my whole point is this. I don't want us to act like there are a ton of trans athletes trying to compete in little girl sports, women's sports, girls sports, whatever the case may be. That is not the case. And we know that. It's minuscule. And what's going to happen
But I did hear you say you believe that girls sports
I
should
100
be
For girls.
biological.
I
girls.
biologically, I think there's an unfair advantage. They talk about the fairness issue. We go back and forth.
So they're all dealing with this stuff here, like they're all, they're all saying shit they wouldn't say 2 years ago or a year ago. I think this is where it devolves into side conversations, and then there's the audio from CNN's a mess.
With, Gavin Newsom. Who is he today? I agree. Perhaps he did evolve, and he did.
Object not just of intense scrutiny in her community, but the president of the United States.
That's
Here,
true.
right
And
here.
understand, you may not like the policy, but where's the humanity of it all?
I'm in her favor. I think she should be able to participate, but she shouldn't be able to knock someone off the podium. And California, I'm sorry, I'll give you. They should be complimented. They're trying to find a compromise, letting the child participate, but not take the child that Scott referred to, who's been training all her life, to get thrown off the podium.
Maybe it's
In
back
3
here.
minutes. What
I
I'm
know, but I
saying
think
is
this is a good
everybody can't
compromise.
just come to. We don't know what a good compromise is.
Stand up for the trans kids. Now, what do? Isn't this a good compromise? Where they're saying, look, you can participate.
I don't know.
You can't tell those kids, well, now you
Arthur,
just.
So they're constantly interrupting each other. I don't know where the part was. I'm not going to search for it. You can see how bad it is. But anyways, this is reality now.
As the hungry and desperate descend on an aid site where there appears to be very little organization, as you can see there. And more images, these are also from Saturday, show people fighting for a bag of flour. At another site, gunfire was heard. Nearly 80 aid trucks traveling through Gaza were looted. That's according to the World Food Program, which says that most of the food was taken by hungry people trying to feed their families.
So right after I watched that Smear Kanish thing, I changed the channel. This was on CNN. Like there's like real news on the weekend, like stuff they don't show you during the week. And so, Israel has blocked. I mean, they have almost no electricity or no electricity there. They cut off the water early on, and they don't have access to the internet because they didn't want videos getting out of what Israel was doing to these poor people, right? The Palestinians. And it's hard to see, like when you see it, it's hard to relate to it. But that looks bad, right? Like these people, they can't get any of these trucks in, which they'll talk about here in a second, because Israel's starving these people. And when they do get trucks, UN gets trucks in there or whatever, they don't have enough food, so there's chaos because all these people are fighting starvation. And, the war-torn pictures that we've seen and some of the stuff, it doesn't, remember Trump said, I've seen all these pictures. It's just bad luck. They just have Trump's a piece of shit out there. I got this clip and I'm going to show in my next video that YouTube recommended. And Joe Rogan's talking about Trump's being the last, he's a nightmare for the elite. And he talks about being shot in the ear and just, and getting up and said, fight, fight, fight. Like, everyone, Joe Rogan's considered this like truth or whatever by lots of the people that follow him, but just really stupid stuff, right? And, the suppression of the media and the apathetic nature of people, this is going to go on. Israel's going to get Palestine. It's already has it, right? It's just like the economy's already collapsed and Palestine's already been encroached on. It's already been annexed.
UN official says it is no shock that these images are playing out in Gaza after a nearly 11-week blockade has deprived families there of the very basics for survival. Samad Aziz, CNN, London.
Joining us now is CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger. David, thanks so much for being here with us. I want to go back to Steve Witkoff's response to the Hamas response, which he called totally unacceptable. What do you make of that? Where do negotiations go from here?
Well, Mr. Witkoff is right in the middle of the hardest problems in the Middle East, because on the same day he's dealing with the Hamas proposal and what may or may not turn out to be a breakthrough with Iran. On Hamas first, the proposal the U.S. had put out was basically for half of the living hostages to be released and a 60-day ceasefire. And Hamas obviously has come back with much smaller numbers and a demand for a permanent ceasefire. And you could see why Hamas wants that. But at this point, they don't have a lot of negotiating capability. A lot of their leadership has been killed, almost most of it. The Israeli military has now confirmed what Prime Minister Netanyahu said the other day, that Mohammed Sinwar, the younger brother of the Hamas leader who had been killed last year, was also killed in a strike.
Okay, so it's a silly thing to believe that Hamas, when Gaza Strip is going to be lost, they're going to get rid of every Palestinian. Whatever they're going to do with them, kill them, get rid of them. I mean, there's 2 million in there. But they're going to be, it's no longer going to be Palestine. It's going to be occupied by Israel. And it isn't because of what happened on January, December, October 7th, or any of these things. It's because they've always wanted the land. Everyone fucking knows it, and they won't say it. It's obvious what they're doing. It's so fucking obvious a child who got the information could figure out what's going on here. And why would Hamas be doing, showing any resistance? Why wouldn't they just release all the hostages? Because that's the one thing that there's Israel say, release all of them. Like, why wouldn't you release all the hostages? You have no bargaining chip. Like, Israel's just beating the shit out of your people, taking your land, stopping them from having food and water, starving them out. I mean, the trauma that's causing these children. And why wouldn't Hamas just give them all the hostages and say, all right, we lose. We've lost. You've fucking beaten us. Because they're not going to, they don't have any bargain. What's the bargaining chip? Is it that they want a ceasefire? When the only thing that's going to create a ceasefire is they don't have an excuse to go in there. If you take away Israel's excuse, which is the hostages, then they're committing a genocide. Once Hamas gives them the hostages, everyone would be like, what are you still fucking killing Palestinians for? You beat them, they're done, right? Why are you still starving them? Like, let them fucking, why are you in their country? Why are you occupying them? They already have so much hate coming from various countries and the UN, and, they've already, and once the hostages is released, they have no excuse to be in there. So why the fuck is Hamas, that probably doesn't even exist? The only excuse, the only reasonable explanation is Hamas is an Israeli asset, and they're doing this to give Israel an excuse to go in there and beat the shit out of the rest of, to conquer that country. And so the whole thing's fucking stupid. It's silly. And Trump is, all these people won't tell you the truth because they're owned by Israel or influenced by them, and they have their own, it's just part of this global fucking evil shit that people do. But here's, let's go to this here. So 3 days ago, Israel announces major expanses of settlement in the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces raid West Bank military vehicle, rams into bus, killing Hajj pilgrims in Jenin. And then here, Arab ministers condemns Israelis' ban on planned West Bank visit. Israeli to block Saudi-led delegation of Middle Eastern ministers from visiting the West Bank. And then all those, that was, recently. But now this is, Israel announces new West Bank settlements despite sanctions threat, confirms plans to create 22 new settlements in occupied West Bank. Okay, so we know that this is what Palestine was, right? And this is what it became when they partitioned it, and this is what it was in 1997, and then 2000. This is what was left of it, right? And so there's no Hamas in the West Bank. There's no Hamas, right? We have this map here. The West Bank here is Gaza Strip, and here's the West Bank. And this is shrunk. So they have nowhere to go because they're surrounded by Israel, and Israel is wanting to annex it, right? This is what Israel wants. This is what the Zionists want. All of this land, and maybe more of it. Like, who says stop there? But this is the land that they claim God promised them, and evangelical Christians think God promised them. So I've been saying that, of course, they're going to take as much land as possible. Hamas doesn't exist in the West Bank. The West Bank isn't done anything. They don't have any hostages. They don't have any of these, whatever excuses, that October 7th bullshit stuff, all that stuff. Like, they're making those things. I mean, Hamas is an Israeli asset, but there's no Hamas in the West Bank. There's no reason for them to be annexing the West Bank, other than that they want to get rid of Palestine, which is their stated goal. And, the plan that we know here is, where's my video clip of it? Somewhere over here. This video clip has 600,077 likes that Trump put up, the real Donald Trump. And it was some guys who, were goofing, using AI just to, they're trying to create figure out how this new AI tool worked to make videos. They make these videos professionally. This was internal. It wasn't supposed to be leaked into the internet. And Trump thought it was like a great idea. These guys were, not Trumpers, but he thought it was a great idea. These two clowns here that aren't speaking anymore. But this is what Trump wants. And certainly Israel wants something like that, but not owned by Trump, owned by them. And they're going to annex Gaza Strip. And then the rest, whatever was Palestine, is going to be Israel. Nobody's going to stop it. And then Israel's going to move towards a bigger expansion. And that's going to require World War III-like shit going on with, And so Israel's going for this, right? They're going for they're going for it, right? This is their thing. And there's Zionists who are in the American government, Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists. There's Zionists in the Israeli government, and they're pushing for this promised land. And I said this, when this first started, this is a land grab. That's what the title of my video was, land grab. And look, it's a land grab. Crazy, crazy how I was able to figure that out. And mainstream media, who knows much more about it than I do, can't, right? Just like I can say, hey, we're fucked economically. And mainstream media, which knows much more about the economy than I do, and all the people they have, all their experts, they can't. And I'm right and they're wrong, so what's going on, right? What's going on that they won't say the obvious? So I got a few leftover things. I'm going to get to some of them. I'll leave some of them for tomorrow, because Sunday usually is a big news day, but who knows, And, I'm covering the news because every day there's something big, as opposed to celebrity culture, which I thought was very important when I was covering it in terms of its influence on people. But now AI and all that shit is, that's the big story, because, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like I was talking about the economy, and I need to say this in a beginning of some video. Hopefully I'll remember to do so. Maybe somebody can remind me in like 2 weeks. But what's their backup plan? If the economy's insolvent, or could be insolvent, or close to being insolvent, Elon Musk said it, according to Velshi, Obama's person said it, that the economy might be insolvent, maybe we can't fix this, then what are you going to do? What's the plan then? Right? What are you guys' plans? Because they're executing those plans right now. And AI is a big part of it. And population is a big part, reduction is a big part of it. And so, speaking of population reduction, I wasn't able to cover this stuff with Trump and Putin last week, but I'll do so now.
Struck a peace deal to end the war. Russian President Vladimir Putin launched one of the most devastating bombardments on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, since the war began. Trump responded by posting online, "Vladimir, stop." Wouldn't you know, Vladimir did not stop. And over the weekend, Russia launched an even bigger aerial assault on Kyiv. And Trump responded again by going online, writing that Putin has, quote, gone absolutely crazy. Now, Trump has been largely defending Russia, criticizing Ukraine, and cutting off necessary U.S. assistance since he took office. But now that he appears pretty impotent in achieving his promise of ending the war,
Limp-ticked.
well, he's melting down publicly a little. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who often chooses his words, almost always, carefully, brushed off Trump's outburst by calling it, quote, emotional, which probably got him.
There is some emotional overload. Trump is going to find out that because of the tariff thing and the fact that the way that he's dealing with the tariff thing, where he's, it's a lot of bluffing, a lot of manipulation, a lot of leverage, and hoping he gets deals that he's going to be taken advantage of from now on. He's going to be seen as being weak with his allies, and America's ripe for the plucking. because of Trump's. You can't handle something so I don't know what the word is. I mean, egregious is one word, but it's not the word I'm looking for. It's not even close to egregious. It's where you're just like doing it like chaotically, and that's not even a good word. It's like it's a lack of. It's like going over the top. 500% tariffs. Just like crazy stuff. And the bottom line is, if you're going to impose all these tariffs, now these tariffs may hurt other countries and companies, which they are not happy about, but they know that Trump can't impose these tariffs and then sell it to the American people when either you can't get stuff on Amazon and in Walmart anymore, or if you do get it, it's 5 times what it used to cost. When cell phones go up to $3,000 and there's a tariff tax, Trump is done. Like, people will turn on him, even his most ardent followers. And everybody knows it, right? So then there was this piece. And, remember that this stuff was news 5 days ago, right? Like, Putin, and it's still going on, but other shit's, the world is cratering. Where, there needs to be a catalyst. It's like there's incendiary, some sort of gas, fire incendiary, I think they call it. Something that helps a fire get going. Gasoline, and gasoline's not a good example because there's many other things, but all these flammable things are being poured everywhere, and they're just waiting for a spark, right? You remember World War I, there was some kind of thing that happened in Prussia, whatever it was. There was a Duke murdered or some kind of thing like that. And then it imploded into World War I, right? There's just all the stuff that I'm covering here in the news that's going on in the news of the world. There's all these possibilities. I talked about collapse. You can have an energy collapse. Energy is responsible for pretty much everything, our economy and our food source, our food and our economy, and all of our products. So if we didn't have enough energy, there'd be a collapse. If there's a food collapse, of course that's obvious what that does, where there's no food, or there's an economic collapse. So all 3 things make the other 2 things collapse. If there's a food or an energy collapse, the economy collapses. Of course, if economy collapses, everything else collapses. And so they're all intertwined. And without all 3 of those things, you can't have our economy.
President Trump is lashing out at Vladimir Putin again today while issuing new threats against the Kremlin. Just moments ago in a social media post, he wrote, "What Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire."
Really, really, really bad? Very, 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 really, 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 very, 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 really, 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 really bad? How bad is it? Really, 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 very, 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 really, really, really bad? Like, what are you talking about, bro? What the fuck are you talking about? Really, 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 very, 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 really bad. Like, what do you mean? Like, is that war? Like, he talks in this childish way with these. Remember, he said the storm is coming, and the freaking all the. I don't know if I should say this. I'm going to anyway. All the QBs creamed in their pants, right? He said the storm is coming, and they were like, it meant nothing. Like, he just says shit like that in a way where he's a bullshitter and he's a grifter. So nothing he says can be taken seriously, because he said a lot of things that he didn't mean. He said a lot of things and made a lot of promises he didn't do. I mean, probably more than 80% of what he says doesn't mean anything, and then 20% of what he says he actually ends up trying or actually doing. And so, you really can't trust anything he says, is the bottom line. But him saying, I mean really bad. Russia's really freaking bad. They're playing with fire. And so does that mean economic sanctions, or does that mean World War III? If it's World War III, that's really bad for everybody.
Sources tell CNN the president is now considering new sanctions on Moscow as he grows more frustrated over the Kremlin's escalating attacks on Ukraine. This is happening after another wave of Russian strikes overnight. They pounded numerous parts of the country, and Ukrainian officials say it.
Okay, so we get the whole idea, right? And so we're edging closer to World War III. You know, and my whole thing, which I'll talk about in the beginning of some video, I have to make a second. These whispers of the brighter world messages. I read the original prophecies that were in the first edition, but then there's all these whispers that talk about prophetic things. And that's something, in February, this coming February, this coming 2025, into 2025, 2026, there's going to be what is hinted at as being a nuclear incident or something of that scale, like something big. And when the big things start dropping, whether it's war or economic collapse or, whatever kind of things, dinosaur invasion, whatever thing that happens, that's when you're going to know, all right, we're fucked because we're just fragile and the world's like teetering on the edge. When you've been in a situation, my family was in this with my, my ex had all these emotional, psychological breakdowns and, suicidal tendencies and cutting and, just creating chaos and all these, these psychological, just totally whatever. And then our family, all along with that, we were just teetering on an edge of poverty and just, I always was wondering it was like we're walking the razor's edge or where the straw that broke the camel's back. You put one straw in the camel's back and it's too much. And then the camel collapses they're strong animals, but everything has its breaking point. I have a forklifts for my bulldozer, right? For my tractor. And the tractor is not a forklift. The forklifts are much heavier. The forklift you see at like Lowe's or some some Home Depot or what it is, like Tractor Supply and these things that people use or in these facilities, they're much heavier, right? And they can lift, a lot of weight, these big forklifts. But my tractor can lift about 1,000 pounds. And it's programmed so if it's over 1,000 pounds, it doesn't lift it, right? It just won't pick it off the ground. And, I don't like to even get close because even with it lifting 1,000 pounds, the fork, it depends on how much leverage there is at the end of the lift, right? And so, there's just things can lift so much, right? These things are prorated for so much, pressure, chains, ropes, all these things. And we're at a situation where we've maxed out all these capacities in our economy, in our culture, in our, the people themselves, functioning as highly as they can. And it just takes one big thing and it's over. Notice they have the Ukrainian flag here in the background in these colors here. And she's, got most of her dresses in the Ukrainian flag, but it's similar. But, we're teetering on the edge. And when some of these big things start going down, these cataclysms or whatever it might be, it'll just, the system will just break. We're just like there's all these fissures. The dam is about to collapse. There's a little bit of water leaking through these various cracks, but the integrity of the dam has been compromised, and just a little bit extra pressure, and it'll the water come barreling through. So I don't know why they're trying to sell me wigs. It's usually the best wig outlet. I'm not in the market for wigs. Just. Mom of 2, 34, undergoes a dozen surgeries to replace her dying bones, which doctors link to the COVID vaccine. So this is an article in Tennessee. This woman, I don't know when this was, when this article was originally published. So this February covered this. Somebody sent to me, but I had already covered it. But, it's there. And then my wife sent me this. It was a video, not very good video, music in the background. The guy was obnoxious. But there's this thing called deuterium. Deuterium is a stable isotope of hydrogen with one proton and one neutron in its nucleus, making it heavier than more common isotope, this thing here. but it is, water is H2O, right? And so there is a hydrogen molecule that's called deuterium that can be deuterium depleted water, and here's the thing here. Is deuterium safe to drink? Yes, it actually tried to drink it compared to normal water, though, because a lot of people say that DTO tastes a bit sweeter than normal water. Well, this person was saying that deuterium is actually quite bad for you, and that they're putting in water like fluoride, and that this water is much worse than regular water, and it can't be detected. So deuterium depleted water is generally considered safe and has not been shown to cause side effects when consumed, while some studies suggest it may have beneficial events, such as reducing stress-induced depressive-like signs in mice and potentially aiding in cancer treatment. There's no evidence to suggest it has adverse effects in humans. Well, this video that I saw, there is, people out there saying the opposite. That's even worse than fluoride, and that they're adding it to water. So I don't drink tap water, just pass FYI, and I don't know how much that's true. And then this thing here, in 2003, assisted diet in Canada, approximately 1 in 20 deaths, with 15,300 people dying with medical assistance. This translates to a rate of 4.7% of all deaths. The rate of growth in assisted dying slowed to 2023 compared to previous years. So there's quite a number of people, 4.7, about 5% of the people in Canada who die, 1 out of 20 is dying with assisted, they're being, what's that guy's name? Whatever his name is, Kevorkian, Jack Kevorkian. They're being Kevorkianed in. It says here, please help us improve Google. They're really pitching the AI thing, which I find a lot better. I mean, I'm, a fan of AI searches over what Siri does or what they do themselves. Although AI is, we've talked about that at the beginning of the video. But anyways, it's all happening, right? All the things that have been talked about in the truth community long before I got here. There are certain things about chipping people. There are certain things about, the debt-based system, the usury system. Not certain things. There's, these narratives about the usury system. There's about assisted death and depopulation. There is about fluoride and poisoning people and all that shit, right? And it's all happening. Like all these things, they are happening right now. Things that were talked about before are now happening. And that's me, that's going back to what I was saying about, well, what is the economic plan? What's the economic plan for all these things? If the economy is going to collapse, what's the overall plan if you can't pay back the debt? If the economy is insolvent, well, then what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with that? Because that's a possibility, right? Like we now have the possibility that's being talked about with the economy that they wouldn't even talk about before. We're talking about World War III. We're talking about all these things. We're talking about, because of the Maha movement and RFK Jr., it's, more popular to talk about childhood obesity and the food problem, our food being poisonous. And so all these things are being talked about. AI, people are freaked out, So what happens if these things go south? What if things don't go our way? I mean, things don't go our way all the time. What if they do that on a large scale? What if one of these things happens? And so they already have plans. You think they don't have plans and contingencies for these things? In fact, the plans are it's like they have these things called controlled burns in these forest fires in the western part of the country, where they burn a fire between two areas, where a fire is already going. And the fire then runs out of fuel because they've burned a strip through it with a controlled fire, a controlled burn. Sometimes the controlled burns turned out to be real forest fires, which is problematic. But they do these controlled burns because let's say you have a forest fire. Well, if you burn the fuel ahead of the fire, then what is the fire going to do? It consume. It'll just burn out because there'll be nothing to keep it going. And so, they have these things in place in our system. They'd be stupid not to. And those things have been in play now for a while and are now starting to either be utilized or the effects of those things are starting to be seen. But all of it, right? I want to get into crypto a little bit with J.D. Vance saying something fucking totally bogus. But this is where we're at, right? This is where we're at the place now where real shit's happening. And it's just the beginning. And then, the rest of the collapse will look like whatever it looks like. Like it's hard to predict that's already happened in the future. But there's a story here, and the story is unfolding. And it's about the end of life as we now know it, and then, our lifestyle being out of stock and these things, and the rest of these things, being implemented. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.